Alright guys, talk about the Formula 1 news. The questions out of Red Bull Racing continue. The Italian press suggests that Gianpiero Lambiase, Max Verstappen's race engineer, will leave the team going into 2026 with not just one, but two teams and maybe more, giving him serious offers on the table for consideration right now. We discussed the Aston Martin offer a couple of days ago. Now Williams, it seems, are getting involved on the act as well, but some suggest that he will be departing the team and departing Max Verstappen in addition to all the other key names that have left Red Bull in recent years. What happens next? Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Lots to get into today. We are going to begin with Ferrari, and we are going to begin with this livery because there have been some concepts thrown around as to what might happen next season. Look, we're not getting Marlboro back on the cars, but this is kind of an F2002 style rendition. The bottom line is next year's cars could look very pretty. This is the front wing. This is kind of the overall potential concept of what next year's cars could look like. Obviously, we know that it's not going to have Marlboro on the rear wing. It's going to have HP and a bunch of blue on the car, probably. But look, who knows what the teams will turn up with next year. Few comments really on Ferrari going into next season because they need a big year. Charles Leclerc has been pretty adamant that this is now or never for Ferrari, not just for the team itself, but also for him, right? If Ferrari don't deliver next year, Leclerc will go, potentially to Aston, potentially somewhere else. That is at least the key discussion as of late. Because, look, Leclerc cannot afford to waste more of his prime years at Ferrari. There is no doubt about that. Can they turn it around? Yes. Will they? Maybe not. Depends on engine, aero, operations, all these other factors. The reality is that Ferrari started out last season poorly, mainly because they got double disqualified in China. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been too bad. But the stint from Imola to Silverstone was pretty solid. During that period, McLaren scored 240 points. Ferrari scored 128, far more than Mercedes and Red Bull in that time period. But then they scored far fewer in the upcoming rounds, and therefore they finished fourth in the end in the championship regardless. Jose Mourinho was even talking a little bit about this and said, Benfica's history shows that while at times it comes from behind, most of the time it doesn't. Hamilton arrived late in the last two World Championships, but he's got 7 or 8 titles. He doesn't always arrive late. He is the F1 driver with the most championships, I believe. So, I mean, yeah, he's right. I don't know if he's trying to make some sort of point here about Ferrari and the quality of the management over there, whether he's just yapping, but probably Mourinho would have something to say. But as we know, he has been a guest with Ferrari recently, so we might not want to say all that much. What we do know is that they need a big change for next year in terms of their competitiveness. Former Ferrari engineers, like everyone's coming out of the woodwork lately to give their comment on Ferrari. We know those comments from Arturo Mazzario shared the other day where he said that Leclerc would not be, well, what he actually said was Leclerc would not be chosen by Enzo Ferrari to even be a customer for Ferrari, let alone be a driver of their Formula 1 team, which was quite remarkable. But, well, Luigi Mazzola says, former Ferrari engineer, I can't put all the blame on Hamilton. Don't see it as a case of saying you, Hamilton, messed everything up. A large part of the responsibility lies with the team. Look, that is obviously the reality. Is that what John Alcon would like to admit? Based on his comments this year, quite possibly not. Over 24 races, you simply can't have failed to understand how this guy drives, or at the very least not be able to give him a car that works consistently for him. Look, we know that Hamilton's driving style did not align especially well with these cars in 22 to 25. Next year, that is likely to be different to a certain extent. I think it's plausible that Hamilton, when he first came into the sport, could have probably adapted better than a 40-year-old Hamilton will be able to. I think Hamilton probably needs cars that align more closely with what has been his dominant driving style of late braking, aggressive turning, that just didn't really align with how these most recent cars actually behaved. But with the reduction of the ground effect and with the elimination of Venturi tunnels, could be a different story next year. Hamilton, though, of course, saw many other problems, not just in the car and his own performance and driving style and these other factors that were at play, but he recognised that there were plenty of issues at Ferrari that need addressing, in his opinion, if they want to have any chance of making a comeback in the upcoming years. So he prepared several documents, whether those are listened to. We've seen some leaks on what their new steering wheel is going to look like, and that almost certainly has taken some major inspiration from what Hamilton has wanted. So it's not necessarily like they're ignoring him. But John Alcon did say shut up and drive effectively a couple of months ago, which might be one thing or the other. The other drama, of course, is about this grey area loophole engine compression thing. We talked yesterday why it might not be so much of a big deal. especially for Ferrari as has been worked out so far, but the reality is we don't know until they turn up to Australia. But apparently Ferrari, Honda and Audi have written to the FIA to want some clarification on this. The rumour the other day is that Mercedes are going to get away with it, it's going to be allowed, but they want to change how these checks on engine compression are done with tougher compression tests floated. So, look, everyone knows if the FIA turn around to Mercedes and say, yeah, okay, I know that we agreed that you could do this, but actually we're now banning it, Mercedes will not be able to have an engine for any of their teams, which means no Mercedes, no McLaren, no Alpine, no Williams for the first few rounds of next season. That is not going to happen. However, Ferrari, Honda and Audi may be plausible in suggesting, it may be a plausible idea to suggest, to say, hey, okay, fair enough, we're not going to change things immediately because technically it's in the rules or whatever, but this is illegal for this reason, so we need to change how the testing is done because it's currently tested at ambient temperatures when the engine is cold, whereas when it's hot, Mercedes apparently have found a way to increase the compression and thus increase the performance you can generate from the amount of fuel you're able to put in the car. But maybe they say, all right, you can get away with it for now, but from race 6, from race 7 and beyond, we're going to introduce a new test, which means you've got to make adaptations. Now we're going to give Mercedes enough leeway to actually make the necessary changes, but it's going to be outlawed in a few rounds' time. That I still don't think is going to happen, but that is probably the best case scenario for the other teams that are not using this trick. Again, this will be a big political battle back and forth. We still don't really know what Mercedes are doing here, if anything, but, all the articles seem to be suggesting that Mercedes are trying something. The other teams are trying to get clarification on it. The reality is, what would those checks be? And what type of can of worms does that potentially open? Because if you want tests done during the race on the compression ratio while the engine is actually running and is hot, okay, it's a very challenging thing to do. But are we opening the door there to saying, oh, well, actually during that race, at some point you went over a curb and your wing flexed more than was allowed, so actually your car was illegal for that moment, so you should be disqualified? Is it opening the door to that? I think we've got to be a little bit careful here about a slight slippery slope. Loic Serra says, what we call grey areas are nothing more than a creativity of human beings, thinking of things that have never been thought of before. I don't think a new regulation, whether after 4 years or after 1 year from its introduction, changes the overall picture. It doesn't change the picture. It changes the field of exploration, because at the start of new regulations, everything is immature. This is Loic Serra alongside Hamilton. They worked together for rather a long time at Mercedes. They will be hoping some of the success of that partnership can remain going into the new season, but Loic Serra doesn't seem to be so frustrated about this whole grey area drama, possibly because himself and his teammates have come up with other ideas on what Ferrari could be doing. I'm sure that all teams will have some thought on potential grey areas and loopholes in the regulations that they will be exploiting. Other teams may do that better than Ferrari, or they may not, or they may have different ones that still provide value. So all sorts of drama. But let's talk about Red Bull Racing. We have discussed their power unit because it's not just Mercedes that are apparently doing this compression trick. Red Bull potentially as well, so they're also in the conversation. But the major drama over the last few days has emerged with regard to another key name at Red Bull potentially departing. So over the last couple of years, Rob Marshall, top engineer, has gone to McLaren, done great things. Jonathan Wheatley is gone. He's now at Sauber. Will Courtenay, their top strategy guy, is gone. He's turning up at McLaren shortly. Christian Horner, the most key of all these figures, was sacked this year. Helmut Marko is now officially out of the team as well, as of a few days ago, just before Christmas. So the whole team, the whole, shall we say, dream team in some respects that it was at Red Bull, the Red Bull, what do you want to say, dynasty or something, they are now gone, and pretty much the whole team apart from Max is gone. And in addition, he's had mechanics, he's had top staff members also departing Red Bull. That happens when you have a team at the peak of their powers. They get key members poached. It is what it is. It will always be a factor. That has been relevant for Red Bull. 22, 23, lots of those top guys got targeted. But also at the end of 2022, as we know, Dietrich Mateschitz passed away. That led to an opening in terms of power, and it led to a massive power struggle, as we understand, over the last couple of seasons, that has led to a lot of departures. I mean, I didn't even mention there Adrian Newey, right? Of course, the key name, really, apart from Christian Horner in this whole discussion, who departed the team at Miami. He's now gone to Aston Martin, and well, that is certainly a conversation when it comes to Gianpiero Lambiase as well. So those are all the key names at Red Bull that have gone. Some of those have gone because of Horner's actions, whatever you want to say. Others have gone for other reasons. But it's really only Max and GP and some others, Pierre Wache and some of the other guys in the technical team that are remaining over there. Most are gone, and there may be more to follow. So a few days ago, Gianpiero was talked about in relation to whatever was happening personally behind the scenes. And look, we know that he was very emotional. We just talked about this at length the other day. I was all concerned because I saw this tweet today that said that, anyway, we've talked about it now, and it's all out in the public domain now, and it's been viewed millions of times on various social media platforms, so I don't think there's any harm in reiterating what has been said. But Gianpiero Lambiase's wife, Eloisa, she has been battling breast cancer. Now, this was made clear in a post that she made on Facebook a few days ago. Now, I shared that yesterday, given that when it was shared in the context that this was a public post. Now, there was then this tweet today that said, no, this is actually from a private page, and it's been disgraceful to share it. Now, this actually isn't true. I went to find it today just to say, okay, can I find this? And this was the Rowan Mary's page that initially made the post. This is all public. This is not on a private page or anything. You can go and find this yourself if you would like. But Rowan Mary's put this out on Facebook. Now, look, I'm sure that Eloisa, his wife, was probably not expecting this to blow up and become so public as it has done. So, I do totally understand that perspective. But also, this was not like a private group chat or a private Facebook group that somebody hacked into and found these comments. This has been noted publicly. And Rowan Mary's make the comment about her making a huge step in her breast cancer journey, and it's GP's wife in the replies. Eloisa replies and says, thanks from the bottom of my heart, I'll be forever grateful, still a journey ahead, the worst is done. So again, I don't want to get too much into the personal stuff, as we talked about yesterday, wishing Eloisa and her family and GP absolutely all the best, and as she said, it seems like the worst is over, so with any luck things are only going to be positive from here. But just wanted to clarify that this was not... It might still be controversial to cover these topics, and I get that, but this was not like a private message that somebody had hacked into and revealed this unfairly to the public. When Eloisa made that comment in reply to a public page, it was probably expected that at some point people would start to talk about it. So anyway, that is what we believe was happening in Lambiase's personal life, Gianpiero, over the last couple of months. And therefore the implication is, okay, is this got anything to do with his potential Red Bull departure? Is it irrelevant? We understand it was probably relevant when it comes to missing some Grand Prix and not intending to be in attendance in Qatar, but deciding to attend anyway. And since the start of December, there's been talk about Lambiase's future, this being GP in this context. So, the Japanese media initially said that Lambiase has informed Red Bull he does not want to travel to races next year due to personal circumstances. That may understandably be wishing to spend more time with his wife. He'll remain with Red Bull but will work from their home base. That means GP will step down as Max's race engineer. So, my perspective on this was and still remains that GP and probably Max believe next year is unlikely for the championship, right? 2026, they're going to stay at Red Bull. Maybe they've got some engine trick, but given their engine and the fact that they committed a lot to this season, there's not much expectation from Red Bull that they're actually going to be winning next year's title. With that context in mind, the team put a lot into 2025, so did GP, so did Max. They nearly got over the line. They didn't. GP, for personal reasons, believes that he wants to step away and probably also thinks this was probably the last good chance to make it work with Max, at least for some time. So this could be a sensible time to step away from trackside operations. Now, if he's decided he wants to step away from trackside operations, then it doesn't matter necessarily whether he's working with Max any longer. If he's stepping into a different role, there are possibilities that other teams could also get very interested. So with all this going on, the other day we saw rumours that Aston Martin had reached out and said, hey, Gianpiero, we're looking to offer you some serious money to take on a serious level of responsibility at our team, effectively alongside Adrian Newey again. The clear intention there would be you can bring Max in a couple of years, that would be fantastic. But it's not just Aston Martin that are interested. And the Italian press, I mean, this is from Motorsport Italia, they go as far to say Max's race engineer seems increasingly intent on leaving Red Bull. He also holds an Italian passport, but I don't think he's going to be going to Ferrari. Gianpiero Lambiase appears to not be staying at Red Bull Racing. So look, you might argue the Italian press is once again taking things a little too far, but, you know, the rumour has gone from at the start of the month, GP was going to step into a different role at Red Bull. There was even some talk that Oliver Mintzlaff had said that GP is not going anywhere. Now we've got rumours that actually, yeah, he will be leaving because he's got offers that are going to be challenging to refuse, and maybe for other reasons internally at Red Bull, he just feels like it's time to go. As I say, all of those key names, initially I excluded Newey, but, you know, throw Newey into the mix as well alongside Horner and Marco and Wheatley, and as I say, with Courtney and Marshall and all of those guys. Kind of everyone's gone now. It's a very different team, and you can understand why GP might think of seeing new horizons in the future, especially because Max's future with Red Bull is far from guaranteed either. So the article goes on to say that not only has he been linked to Aston Martin, but motorsport.com understands negotiations with Williams, led by James Vowles, are still ongoing. So there was just further discussion about this season when he missed the Austrian and the Belgian Grand Prix and he was replaced. They don't go into details, understandably, on those personal reasons. So following discussion that he was apparently attracted to the Williams project, which intends to reclimb the ladder in keeping with its historic prestige. However, the Silverstone team, this being Aston Martin, has reportedly made a hefty offer for a management role which would not require him to attend all 24 races on the calendar. There was talk about a CEO position potentially, in addition to Adrian Newey. We talked about some of the implications of that the other day. So, yeah, very interesting that Williams are apparently involved as well, and reports that Williams are interested in GP. GP is interested in potentially going to Williams, but what could they offer him compared to Aston, right? Because, look, Williams may make substantial gains next year. That would be a huge grab for Williams if they were able to get GP onto their books. But can they offer as much money as Aston Martin? Can they offer a better role than Aston Martin could potentially offer? Look, I don't think Williams are expecting to get Max Verstappen in the coming years. Aston Martin are, and they would surely be willing to do quite a lot to acquire someone who is likely to be a pretty key piece of getting Max into your team at some point. But just the fact that Williams are also interested and negotiations are ongoing, I mean, it means that GP's chances of staying are relatively slim, I think, at Red Bull. Not to say that it won't happen, but maybe they're not slim, but they're certainly shorter odds than they were, as it were, because if it's just Aston Martin that are saying, hey, GP, we'll offer you this to leave Red Bull and to leave Max, and, you probably don't want to be race engineer anymore anyway due to those reasons, so we can give you a better offer, effectively. But then in GP's mind, it's like, okay, well, am I weighing up leaving Red Bull to go to Aston? Does that make sense? Am I working with Lance Stroll, etc., etc.? Those questions. Or am I staying at Red Bull where I know and I know that I'll get promoted and do whatever role and the team will look after me, right? But if there's now another team, Williams are involved, now all of a sudden you've got a bidding war. You've got Red Bull can probably only offer so much. You've got Aston Martin, who have got a lot of resources. You've got Williams trying to come up with competitive offers. And, when you've got two teams very interested in getting GP, all of a sudden the offer that he will get between those two teams will probably be significantly greater than what Red Bull would be able to potentially compromise with. So it makes it even more likely. There's also some interest just because if it is Aston Martin, the team used to be Jordan, Force India, etc. And GP actually worked for those guys before, so there might still be some people around for which this is relevant. But yeah, very much intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.